Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining me for the book club for Radical Product Thinking. I've really enjoyed the questions that you've shared after reading the book. And these questions have been a pleasure to answer because they've just shown such deep reading of the book. So thank you for those questions. I'm going to answer them in this video, and please feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn if you have other questions or thoughts that you'd like to share. So the first question I have here is, which product diseases are you seeing more frequently? Which ones less frequently? Any other trends ahead that you foresee in this space triggered by COVID or driven by other changes? Now, which diseases I see, it mostly depends on the size of company that I'm working with. So in startups, I mostly see pivotitis and hero syndrome most often. On the other hand, when I look at larger companies like multinationals, the diseases I see most often are strategic swelling and locked-in syndrome. In companies that are in that growth stage where they're hyper-focused on growth, very often there's an iteration-led approach for scaling, and then I see an acute version of obsessive sales disorder and hypermetricemia. In terms of trends, the new trend that I'm seeing is that there's a lot of obsessive sales disorder happening right now in HR. With the pandemic and just the large number of employees who are quitting their jobs, citing burnout, what's happening is that very often I see HR teams resorting to really short-term solutions to really what are much deeper problems. So very often I see HR teams, for example, proposing solutions such as, oh, let's do company retreats or a 3-day weekend, or let's do a well-being portal where we can encourage employees to apply mindfulness practices. I see these short-term solutions being proposed for employee well-being instead of things that are really aligned with the vision. Things that might require investing in the vision. If you think about the vision versus survival, if you're investing in the vision, you might, for example, change how employees are being measured, or you might plan that there is more DEI work that needs to be done in your organization. And so instead of that, we end up taking on more vision debt, which is what leads to obsessive sales disorder. This next question is, are there any ways that people could gain the 2-axis quadrant prioritization of vision versus survival, since this has been found to happen in the weighted measures approach? What do you watch out for to avoid this risk? Now, what I've seen happen most often with the vision versus survival rubric is that very often the loudest voice wins. The whole point of this rubric of vision versus survival is to really communicate our intuition, to get people to participate in decision-making, or at least understand our intuition and buy into it as a result of it. But when you always have one loud voice, we're really not getting that sort of the benefit of the buy-in. And so it's really important to take a more facilitative approach. Make sure that you're getting also the quieter voices to contribute and share how they would prioritize features in this vision versus survival. And when you're seeing disagreements, really get to the root cause of, well, are we not in alignment on the vision, or is it on survival? And that sort of discussion is really the goal of this. So the main thing to watch out for is the loudest voice winning. And what you want to try to make happen is to give space to hear all the voices in the team as you talk about that vision and vision versus survival. This next question was, you shared that Spotify was ditching OKRs as it no longer brings them value, and that they're instead focusing on context and priorities, and then letting their teams work out how to get there. I expect this may have been a bit controversial when some or many companies, given the current popularity and usage of OKRs. Do you have other stories or case studies of companies moving away from OKRs to follow this new approach? So you're right that in addition to Spotify moving away from OKRs, yes, this whole idea that OKRs are harmful to our products and to our companies in general, that is controversial. But it's controversial because when we have truly deep set beliefs on something, even when there's scientific evidence, it's really hard for people to accept that. And I'll get to a story that illustrates that in just a moment. What I first want to talk about is what are some things that you can do that sound a little less radical. One example is the trend that I'm seeing where people talk about, look, it's important to divorce company goals from product metrics. So at least that's a first step that, you can raise awareness that you should not be including product metrics in your OKRs. So for example, if one of your product metrics is 20,000 signups, that's not what you want to include as part of your OKRs. That's one of the first steps. But I think the bigger issue here is that we really need to raise awareness of why OKRs are harmful, and why the SMART goals-based approach doesn't always produce the best results. And we need to spread this awareness because there is such a deep-set belief that goals basically is how you build successful products, or that's the key to success. And the story I want to share is, another example of scientific evidence showing that conventional wisdom was wrong and how we just resist that. And the example I have for you is, in London in 1831, there was the first cholera epidemic where 6,000 people died. And so authorities at the time believed that, and experts as well, everyone believed that the leading cause of cholera was miasma, which was this idea that it's the fumes from this decomposing matter that is causing cholera. And so to remove all the miasma from London, they decided that they were going to empty all the open sewers and drains and empty all the cesspools in London into the Thames River. Well, of course, that caused the Great Stink, and in 1848, it caused the second cholera epidemic where 14,000 people died. Now, at the time, there was an epidemiologist, John Snow, who looked at the patterns of how cholera was spreading, and he realized that it was waterborne. And in fact, he found the pump in Soho, which was spreading infected water, and he had authorities remove that pump handle. And once that was done, cases in Soho just plummeted. So he showed scientifically that it was a waterborne disease. And yet this miasma theory persisted for 12 more years. So it wasn't until 1866 that the cholera epidemic was brought under control, because finally experts agreed that it was waterborne, and then they told the public to boil water. My point is that today, SMART goals and OKRs are the miasma theory of our times. And we steadfastly continue to believe that SMART goals and OKRs is how you build successful products, or how you motivate people and drive success, right? And that needs to change, but it will take time. It needs to happen slowly because we spread awareness. So it's really important to talk about OKRs and why they're harmful and spread these ideas. I'll go to the next question, which is, the metaverse is this month's hot topic in tech, with the likes of Microsoft and Meta/Facebook investing heavily in this space. It really sounds like an attitude of, if I don't build it, someone else will, bringing into question uncharted ethical consequences. What advice do you have for product teams joining the competitive race towards the next iteration of the internet? My advice is not so much for product teams at all. It's really for individuals. And the reason is that, it's not product teams that take responsibility. Each of us as individuals have to think about the responsibility that comes with building products. Just very recently, actually, a good friend of mine was changing jobs, and she had a bunch of offers in hand. And she compared all of these offers, and then she picked one. And the one she picked was Facebook. And that saddened me a lot, because this friend of mine, recognizes the digital pollution that's happening in the world, especially by a company like Facebook. But then she was focusing mostly on the fact that, well, she's only going to work on this little piece. And so it's not really contributing to digital pollution. And this really goes to show how much, we go to great lengths to justify our behavior and our actions, because we don't want to think that we're contributing to digital pollution. We really need to embrace the responsibility that comes with building products. And the thing that we need to think about is the responsibility we have towards this next generation. What really hit me recently is how profoundly the new generation thinks differently about technology and innovation as progress. When I was growing up, there was this optimism about the future that technology was going to create a better world. There was optimism that, innovation was going to mean progress and a better life for humanity. When I talk to the new generation, people who are either teens all the way up to their early 30s, people don't feel optimistic about technology. Very often what I hear is this belief that, technology isn't going to make the world better. And what I've heard recently are opinions such as, I don't think it's right to bring life into this world, that I'd be willing to adopt or foster kids, but not to bring life into the world because I don't feel like it would be the right thing to do to this new life. And that to me is a profound change, right, from the optimism that we had growing up. And herein lies my thought that, we heard Greta Thunberg say, how dare you, to all these political leaders who weren't acting on climate change, right? When it comes to digital pollution, her words really, I think, are to every individual. Every one of us, we're contributing to digital pollution in our products in some way. And our question of how dare you should be ringing in our ears. And we should be thinking about how can we build products that have a smaller digital footprint. So my advice is not for teams, but really for each of us building products to think about that question. And it's a deep one, but I leave it to you to meditate on this one. It'll take some time, I think, to digest also. This next question is, where do you see product management in the future, 5, 10, or even 20 years from now? What I see a lot of today is that, the trend today is product management has become about, optimizing for metrics, A/B testing. I really feel like this skill set will become table stakes. And what I think is going to happen in the future is, right now, I see a lot of companies still struggling to figure out, well, what exactly does product management do in my organization? I think increasingly, as these skill sets are table stakes, organizations will move towards the idea that, the reason I need product management is to be able to optimize for metrics and build successful products. That's the low-hanging fruit. But over time, in the 10 to 20-year span, what I really see differentiating product managers is the ability to have a very clear vision and then be able to communicate that to teams and translate that into action, build vision-driven products. And that skill is hard to build, and it's very different from just the table stakes and the commodity today of being able to optimize for metrics, do A/B testing, etc. And then the last question here is, what's next for you? Any other challenges or areas you would like to tackle? For me, the next area that I'm really working on is being able to do more workshops for teams to spread these ideas on, how do you build radical products? So being able to get teams very quickly up and running, being able to craft a vision and systematically translate that into action. So I've been doing a lot of workshops, but aside from that, kind of a longer term picture that I have is I really want to raise more awareness of digital pollution. And I'm considering that perhaps that's the next book that I want to write that is really focused on digital pollution and how we can embrace responsibility. I covered that in Radical Product Thinking in 2 chapters, but I think there's a whole book that's due on this particular topic, and I'm thinking about that next. So with that, I've answered the questions that I've gotten from you for this book club, and I've really enjoyed these thoughtful questions. Please feel free to reach out on LinkedIn to share your stories of how you're applying radical product thinking, or if you have questions. Thank you again, and you can find the book Radical Product Thinking in bookstores, and remember to share this with others. Thank you.